And if you take a look at a cage, usually cages are in a row, like seen here in this view, 1, 2, 3, and even up to 6, 7 cages after each other. Now, if you look at what's going in, there's some limit on how much oxygen can be in the sea, can be dissolved into the sea, going into a cage, and there's some consumption there, and the remaining oxygen is going to the next cage. If we take an example, 10 centimeters per second, we are in a fjord, and do some calculations. Okay, let's then assume that the net is clean. Then the net itself has a reduction in speed about 10%. It's biofold, the reduction is higher. But let's take it 10% now. This is what coming in. This is the zero up there. This is the oxygen between the first 2 cages, and so on. Okay, after the 5th cage, we finally come down to a level of 6 milligram per liter seawater. That's the level of stress for fish. It starts to be stressed there. Come down to 3.5, it is mortal. If the fish is stressed about half an hour every day, it will not eat the next 24 hours. Okay, if the net, take just an example, is biofold, you see there that the fish in the last cages here will not survive, or at least they will not have an optimal growth. There's a sample from a Norwegian fish cage. Most places when you have tidal currents, the tidal, at least in the near shore, it will turn around, and in time of when it turns around, it's almost no current. And then you get a situation like this one. So, and the effect on fish is the fish will be stressed, reduce the fish uptake, and over time reduce the immune system, and consequently this protection against diseases is reduced, and also this causes high aggressivities. The fish farming is old industry now, 35 years. This figure is fairly new. This one was actually from a report from 2004 in Norway. And I think also both in Norway and Faroes as well, at least some fish farmers have taken this consideration into account, and most of them can see it as opposed to results on the bottom line quite shortly after. Now, all these blue areas with 10 centimeters seconds, that's a computer game, computer play. Is that realistic? This is measurements. There's a site here in the northern part of the Faroes. It's not on the calmest fjord in the Faroes. It's in a distribution of the current speed. See that below 5 centimeters per second is almost 70% of the records here. And very few of them are up to 10 centimeters per second. That's all not in the Faroes, but that's for many fish farming sites, both in Norway, just in Iceland, seem quite a lot of the same. Compared to, this is a very good ventilated, maybe even too good. But it may not be that bad for this one, because the point is the cage, or fish in the cage, can survive such a period if it's not too long, approximately 15 minutes. It's going above 15 minutes, you will have the fish trial will be reduced. For some years ago, we started to look at how should we design cages to go out to on the plus on the green areas where we call it strong currents, and we started a row of tow tank projects. We start at the net makers company Vågen Fuglafjord in their tank, continue in the University of New Hampshire, United States, and also been in the tank of U.S. Naval Academy in Baltimore. There we particularly investigate the flow around and through the net in cages, and use that to develop numerical tools, also develop software to make calculation on fish cages, and also how the flow is. And that's First step of that, actually a PhD project completed last week in Hampshire. That's the first step. I'm not going into detail, but involved in that is quite technical. But take results from the total tank experiments done in Fuglafjord. On top, we have a traditional fish cake, increasing speed in that direction, half nautical mile, 0.25 meter per second. And in this one, you only have in the bottom rim of the cages, there's a lead line or sinking line. It's not lead in that, but that's the popular name of that. In some cages, some farmers put extra weights in there. It helps a little bit. And some of them are putting a solid ring in there with some weight. And see, there's some difference between this type of cages, the traditional old cages, and what more and more people and more farmers are using now. Okay, this is done in a tow tank. And next step was, is that realistic? We performed an experiment in the northern part of the Faroes, together with some fish farmers, put a ring in a commercial cage. Oops, sorry. And did some measurements side by side with one with such a heavy ring and one without, and see the difference between those two. This is the depth of the bottom of the cage, bottom rim, and this is the central part of the bottom. That's a couple of years ago, 3-4 years ago. Since some farmers are using that in the Faroes, it seems to be quite common in countries like Canada, Chile, and also Norway now. But all these changes here is going from 50 meters to 5 meters. Look at the speed, the same figures as before. It's not a very high speed. So when it's talking about fish farming with strong currents, it's relative to the equipment you are using.